Ciao a tutti, scrisiele qua, and I hope you're all well, and sorry to my Italian viewers. Today, as you may have sort of guessed and noticed, we are going to be talking about the Italian heavy tank, the P-40 Leoncello. Leoncello. Now, this was a fantastic design tank for, the 1930s. However, as time crept by, the tank started to fall behind in the technological arms race, which was happening in the world at that time. Initially designed as an upsized version of the M1139 medium tank, with flat, thick armoured plates, the P-40 was going to be a sort of heavy infantry tank. Initially, however, as the Italian forces met with the fearsome T-34s and its sloped armours, which was causing major issues for Italian forces at the time in, I think it was Czechoslovakia. One of those two, I think. The P-40 was back on the drawing board. As a result, the tank was given some sloped armour plates, giving it a little bit more survivability, as well as upping the armour from 40mm to 50. The vehicle was constructed using two techniques, welding and riveting, so the tank is welded in places and riveted. Of course, rivets can be a major issue and cause some weakness to the vehicle, along with adding more shrapnel that can injure crews. The tank was tested against the British QF 2-pounder and 6-pounder initially. The armour withstood hits from the 2-pounder, however failed against the 57mm 6-pounder guns, which was becoming the main tank for most British the main gun even for most British tanks at the time. As the months rolled on, the role of the tank was changed from an infantry support vehicle to a tank hunter, as it became clear that anti-tank capabilities were a must for all new vehicles. This again required a redesign of the tank, changing a proposed 47mm gun to a 75mm and saldo cannon de 75-34 along. With the need for more secondary weapons, twin 8mm Breda machine guns were placed into the tank. Originally they were to be fitted in a barbette, along with a coaxial 8mm machine gun. However, this was later replaced by a single machine gun in the turret, and the possibility of placing a coaxial machine gun on the roof for the commanders to use as an anti-air support gun. One of the sort of issues with that, though, is there wasn't really great access to the roof and top of the vehicle for the commander, so it wasn't a very easy gun to use. The commander basically had to get out the tank to use it. Originally, a petrol engine was considered for the tank, which would have given a good power-to-weight ratio. However, due to restrictions in Italy, a diesel engine was favoured and considered more practical and reliable. So the V12 SPA 342 Fiat engine was placed into this tank. It was down around about 100 horsepower on the petrol variant, meaning the tank did not have a great power-to-weight ratio. However, it did have some good torque, initial torque, and also torque for climbing things, so it's quite... You can actually get some good manoeuvrability out of this tank on slopes. It does quite well. Also, hit the ammo here, and of course, no explosion. With that, just pausing for a second and talking about gameplay, 270 grams of explosive mass into the ammo underneath the gunner, and did not do anything. Just typical. Anyway, initially laid down in the early 1940s, it was not until 1943 that the tank was actually ready for production. This of course meant that the armistices had came into effect. The German army quickly seized the factory where the tank was being produced and put them into building the tanks for themselves. Although some of the Italian forces of the RSI did receive the vehicle later in the war, the Wehrmacht were not all that impressed with the Italian tank, so they sort of gave it to the Italian forces. but they also sort of used them for other options. Around 100 P-40s were produced at the end, but most of them ended their lives as static pillboxes. There are even reports of the tanks being placed on the battlefield as static vehicles, as they did not have their engines in anymore, and they were towed to the Battle of Anzio and used as sort of a static pillbox slash tank on the sort of areas where they were fighting. There were reports of the P-40 tanks being used up until the end of the war. Most were used as reserve vehicles and did not go into battle, however, hence the fact there were some left at the end of the war. One tank was captured in Germany by the American forces and sent to the testing grounds in Aberdeen. Two of these tanks are still in existence, one in Rome and the other in Lecce. So, there's not really that much. Well, there's a bit of history to talk about on this tank. I mean, the fact that it was such a long-awaited vehicle for the Italian forces, it could have made a bit of difference to the Italian forces if it had come earlier. This tank would have been very capable up against tanks like the Matilda, for instance, where the Italians did suffer. The sort of gun was capable of causing a fair bit of damage, but it was a... it did lack that real ability to sort of take on things like the Shermans and stuff like that. It was a tank sort of out of time, and in-game you can feel that. So, in-game we currently have two Italian tanks in the Italian forces line, the P-40 and the M26 Ariete. These are both premium vehicles that can only be bought in a bundle pack. The P-40 costs around $20 US. With that, you'll get the tank 1,000 golden eagles and some premium time. Currently, the P-40 is the only Italian-built tank in the game, so it does have some collector's value. Now, right here, you can see us struggling against this Sherman. Now, if I'd switched to the ballistic cap, I might have done a little bit better job here. I also didn't notice there was a Sherman sitting left of me. But as you can see, the heat shell is not all that good for use. It's good for front-on engagements when you're taking on a tank like the Sherman, but from the side you're better off using that armor-piercing ballistic cap. There is relatively good armor on the vehicle. You do bounce quite a few shots, but you're not impervious to especially things like the Sherman. So, we did get a little bit of death there, but we did manage to take out, sort of give one assist tank. So we'll hop back in another vehicle. Now, getting this tank now does mean you can't really research any other vehicles. However, it does mean that you can train your Italian tank crews, and that can be quite useful for anticipation for the Italian tech tree. Now we fire off a heat shell there and go through, take out his gun breech. Fire off a second shell, much better, and we knock out the crew. So I know that there's another Sherman down there, so I don't really want to roll down this hill and get sniped. So thinking about going around and flanking. Now the Italian tank line will hopefully come one day. Hopefully it's next thing on the list, because it is something that people are getting a little bit annoyed about. Obviously I don't know when it's coming out, but when it does I will give you more information. The tank has around 330 horsepower and weighs 26 tons. Sorry, 26 kilograms. Sorry, 26,000 kilograms. There we go. Sorry, my stumbling across words there as I'm reading. It doesn't have a great power to weight ratio, meaning you have sort of horrible acceleration, top speed and reverse speed are pretty much dire. But as I said, it is good for climbing. That diesel engine does give it good torque, so climbing things you do generally have quite a good time at. It's relatively good at getting up decent hills. The tank is also very slow with its turret rotation. I believe it's a hand crank turret, so it does struggle with that. It's similar to a Japanese tank, in all honesty. Add to that the poor, sort of relatively poor side armour, and relatively weak gun. It's not terrible at 3.3, but when you are up tiered, you are going to notice the difference. At 3.3 and below, you tend to have a good time in this tank. The sloped armour at the front is quite handy, and it will bounce quite a few shells. And if you do penetrate with that armour-piercing cap ballistic cap shell, the filler will generally one-shot most vehicles. You do also have smoke. However, it is placed on the very back of the tank. Now you can see the dispensers just on the left and right hand sides of the spare wheel there. Now we creep up on this M4A3, take a shot, go through his engine deck, reload, aim the shot, and we're going to go for that turret now. And we go straight through the turret and take out his crew. So that's the spawn camper dealt with. The spawn campers are now dealt with, so we can now have a safe spawn. Now, with the smoke shells being placed on the back of this tank, it is quite a good way to sort of reverse into smoke, but you don't have front smoke. So if you are looking to smoke up when you're damaged, it's not going to do much use to it unless the enemy is behind you. Now the big question is, would I recommend this tank? No, in all honesty. However, if you are a collector, it is a nice, unique vehicle, and gives you the chance to play a tank not many people see on the battlefield. I would only recommend getting this tank when it's on sale. Currently it is on sale for 50% with the 6-year anniversary, so it is worth doing that, and I have to send out a thank you to a fan who actually allowed me to get this. I'm very chuffed about that. I did ask to remain. They asked to remain to be nameless, but I do thank them very much for that. So the vehicle is it is okay, but as I said, it's not the best tank you're ever going to use, and it does struggle quite a bit in some areas. The speed of this vehicle is horrible. The penetration of that armor cap ballistic is not great. The 75mm on this tank is not the best. Having, you know, about 70mm of penetration, it's not bad, but it's not going to do great things. You are going to struggle with the Sherman's T-34s and so on. However, Panzer IVs and Panzer IIIs are not too much of an issue. You will actually be able to go through them, but generally you're going to be on their team, so it's nothing to really think about. The coaxial machine guns are not really worth anything. They're 8mm machine guns, which is a bit unique in the game, something a little bit different with an 8mm Beretta, but they're only really useful for open anti-aircraft vehicles where you can shoot the crew members, because you're not going to go through any armour with these things. They are pretty weak and pathetic. It's similar to how Lewis guns and things like that act with 7.7mm. The tank is quite fun to play when you can play it well. When you have good games in it, you do feel very sort of very tough and like you've done something good, because it's not the easiest vehicle to use, and it's, I guess it's not that bad looking. It's quite a pretty tank. It almost looks like a sort of DIY Panther tank. It looks like somebody's just made a Panther out of bits of scrap metal and rivets laying around. So that's kind of cool. As I said, the sloped armour does help you a bit. It does save your life a few times, but you do have to remember that there are sort of some vehicles with much higher penetration abilities. You're going to be sort of okay against standard Shermans from the front, but if they get to the side of you, you are going to be in big trouble. Here we have an M4A1. So we just aim for the side, we hit the turret, and as you see, we bounce straight away on the reload, and we go straight through the armour and knock the tank out. And that is the end of that match. So we'll just head to the post-battle screen results. Okay, and here we are at the post-battle screen results for that match. As you can see, it was a relatively good match. We actually got 3 kills, just 1 death, 1 one assist, 1 critical. That shooting on the Jumbo, I think it was, or the Sherman, was pretty insane. Like, we couldn't really penetrate the front of that thing. So we did have trouble there. That would have been just a standard Sherman, sorry, can't really penetrate the frontal armour of them with our main round because, as I said, the penetration of this gun is not great. So the heat the heat does help sometimes. So we got a eye for an eye, according to intelligence, tank rescuer, shadow strike, and final blow. So that was nice. We also made a nice tidy little profit there, so 37,000 lines, and got some useless research points because we can't research any vehicles for tanks. Okay, well, I hope you've enjoyed this video. I hope you've enjoyed this little bit of history of this vehicle as well, and gameplay, and found it somewhat useful. If you own a tank, I hope it helps you in the future. If you don't own a tank and you want to buy it, I hope it helps sort of give you the idea of what you're going to be getting. Okay guys, well, until next time, this is me, Screwzilla, out. Bye bye. Does. This guy's coming in for a head-on. Don't want any of that. Oh! Oh, that was beautiful! Holy crap, that was hilarious.